Thank you, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone to USU's virtual conversation on flexible degrees for adult learners. This is a sort of new USU initiative which is trying to promote deeper conversations around some of our more innovative approaches to student success by literally bringing together a set of institutions who are working in this space, having a conversation amongst them where they introduce their programs to each other, and then we open it up to other institutions who are also either working on these issues or want to learn more. So welcome. This is the second of these conversations. I'm going to do quick housekeeping and then we'll get started. First, just so you know, every speaker will have 5 minutes and only 5 minutes to discuss their program, just to share the basics to enable a good conversation. Everyone else will be muted. After each person has spoken, we will then allow the speakers to ask each other questions to allow them to sort of dig deeper based on that knowledge of working in the same space. We're then going to invite any of you out there to share your programs if you're also working in this area. You can basically, if you click on your screen to your left where you can see it on your panel, we will see a hand and we'll unmute you. We'll then open it up for questions using the same hand-raising method, and then enable, I think, a good discussion so we all learn about strategies and supports for adult learners, especially flexible degrees, which is a sort of common way that we're seeing out there for this particular innovation. Now, we're going to get started. We're going to have a welcome from President Mark Rosenberg, who chairs USU Student Performance Strand and will soon be the USU chair after the summer meeting. And we've been doing a lot of work in sharing best practices and emerging practices, so this is one of the initiatives under that strand. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to President Rosenberg for an introduction, and then I will introduce each speaker.
Well, good afternoon, or maybe if you're in a different time zone, good morning. Thank you for being on this conversation. The USU is committed to finding opening up new pathways and learning more and more about ways in which we can not only enhance our sustainability but provide additional value to our learner communities. And this conversation is intended to help us to better understand the kinds of options we have with adult learners. I think every institution that is going to be presenting is very committed to adult learners, and so we know we can advance the state of the art, and that precisely is the purpose for doing so. So I want to thank our speakers for being on. Allison Bell, the Director of Degree Completion from IUPUI, Richard Irwin, Vice Provost for Academic Innovation and Support Services, University of Memphis. Thank you. Suquant Jaj, Vice Provost for Academic Innovation, Student Success at Portland State, and Laura Pedrick, who is Special Assistant to the Provost for Strategic and Initiatives, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, online. Thank you all for being on, and I'll turn it back to Sherry so we can begin.
Okay, thank you very much for that welcome. We're really appreciative of your leadership of this initiative. I think we've been doing some great things along the way. Just one apologies, one correction. We did have a change in speaker, so Robert Smith, a career consultant for Degree Completion Office, will be speaking for IUPUI today.
Sorry, Robert, I missed that.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Like I said, we only changed it in the information yesterday, so apologies that you didn't get it. So what we're going to do this in alphabetical order because that's the fairest way we've got. So we're going to start with Richard Irwin from the University of Memphis, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his program.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to do so and the invitation to be a part of this group. So as was mentioned, we pride ourselves in this type of flexible degree programs, the services that we provide to our adult students. And one of the things that we've developed in the last couple of years that is really gaining traction and fitting the demands and needs of the adult student is really modifying two combined existing practices to come up with something a little bit different that I think makes a lot more sense, and I'm anxious to get your feedback. And that's really the basis for this is credit for prior learning, which is not a novel concept in the for the adult student. But everything that we had up to this point was really kind of a high risk, high reward, all or nothing, and I'm primarily talking about credit by exam. And then there's an experiential learning component to it as well. And so I was kind of challenged by the fact that if a student, particularly an adult student, was able to test out of 50 or 60% of a course, that was considered failure. And I felt that was kind of odd. A student already knows half of the, demonstrates the ability to competency in half of the course, is not only required to now take the course, but to pay for an entire course when they obviously know a good proportion of it. So we've had some innovative units come on board with us and begin to work on what I call Credit by Exam 2.0, and that is a partial completion of a course through Credit by Exam or experiential learning credit, particularly when either of those is aligned with directly with learning outcomes from a course. So these units, which nursing has really embraced the experiential learning component, School of Health Studies, and the Kemmons-Wilson School of Hospitality and Sport Management have grasped the Credit by Exam 2.0, and it's been very interesting in our kind of pilots of these, what some of the results have been, because we it really resonates with students when they learn that they have the opportunity not only to take that challenge exam, but to perhaps bypass the modules that they demonstrate knowledge in. So critical to that has been the savings of time and money, two very valuable resources that we've provided for the student. The next two iterations of that, and one that we are working with APLU and USU as part of the COG program, is then for the content completion, when there's been the partial fulfillment through either ELC or the credit by exam, is layering in adaptive learning for the remaining content. And so that can really affect the pacing of a course, so that a student who has demonstrated 50% worth of the content now can complete the remaining 50% almost their own pace, or one that fits their learning style or their competency basis. So it's a really neat continuum. It's a really neat platform for us to provide the opportunity to demonstrate and actually realize the value of knowledge that you're already bringing to the class or to the course, and then to be able to have that type of learning component added to it through the adaptive learning for the completion of the course. So we're looking forward to the rollout. These courses in that context will have the first set of them available this fall, thanks to the grant, and so it's been a rather exciting venture. Some of the barriers, obviously, were what I've already described, as far as the all or nothing and the challenge of convincing faculty that partial completion is a good thing. And then one of the other barriers that we've encountered is the development of adaptive learning. The embedding that into a course is pretty labor intensive. The faculty are sticking with, kind of like when you first go online. And so it takes an awful lot of work, but they know that the rewards are there in the end. And so looking forward to the results on how that fully robust course is going to be delivered this fall. I probably ran a little short of my 5 minutes.
No, short is good. Actually, like I said, the idea is to get the basic information out and then enable us to talk about it together. So again, Sukwant Jaj from Portland State is on next. So let's get you opened up. Oh, you're open.
Hi there.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Sherry. And thank you, Richard. I'm Sukwan Josh from Portland State University. PSU is Oregon's urban research university. We have 27,000 students. 22,000 of them are undergraduates. And the project I'm going to talk about, we began it about 4.5, 5 years ago as part of a presidential initiative called Rethink PSU. The goals of Rethink is to create essentially rethink student learning in ways where we are reducing costs and improving outcomes, increasing access using technology with our commitment to community engagement. Our motto is let knowledge serve the city, and that's that kind of community engagement is quite important to us. As part of that work, when we began, we did two kinds of studies. We did market size studies to look at the number of Oregonians who have began a college degree but never completed it. And that number is about 500,000 Oregonians fall in that category, and a few 100,000 of them can actively be brought back into the education pipeline. So that's really an exciting problem for an urban university to take on and serve, and that remains our goal as part of our work. So that's one thing. And then we looked at the kinds of academic programs that are of interest to students who have dropped out but might be interested in coming in. And that was sort of the second half of our study. In our work, we use design thinking, and that means that we work very closely with both the faculty, the staff, as well, particularly in this case, the students in understanding what are the kinds of things that they're interested in. We had a series of engagement sessions, design thinking sessions, where we were able to gain an increased understanding of what adult learners in the Portland region value when they consider enrolling at PSU. And I'd like to just share a little bit about it. We began with maybe 50 plus values, and then we'll narrow them down to about 20 top concerns that they have identified. And what we found was it's consistent. What we are hearing from students directly was consistent with sort of these broad market research that we have done in 2014. And what's clear is that most adult learners seek to balance their studies with their work and life. It seems obvious, but it's good to have that reinforcement. And many of the high value statements that we heard from them had to do with increased flexibility and access. So both of those things are vital to them. They were interested in a wide range of solutions. For example, online learning, improved scheduling of in-person classes, making travel to campus relevant. So they wanted to come to campus when those visits will actually be of high value and not for low value things. And they were seeking options to accelerate or slow down based on their changing work and life situation. We further studied this balance between flexibility and access, like what is more important to them? Is it flexibility or it's access or affordability really? And it turns out that affordability, they're very price sensitive, but it doesn't mean that they're interested in a low cost solution. What students consistently told us was they wanted a high quality learning experience, and they were willing to pay for it. It was essential for them to derive appropriate value from their experience. So that's something we heard repeatedly from adult learners, that it needs to be a high quality experience that is going to have meaningful impact on their life and their career. And they have high expectations about the role of their degrees in helping them seek gainful employment, both in terms of their curricula, but also in terms of career services and internship possibilities. So this work that we have done with adult learners and understanding their needs, both in terms of how they want to learn, as well as sort of what their goals are, has helped us and is going to continue to help us think about the kinds of services we need to build for them. Now coming back to more sort of practical things, how we have acted and what is the scale of our work. Since 2014, we have built about 25 plus flexible degrees as well as programs. We have worked for over 200 faculty members and had an impact on about 5,000 students. Our growth rate is about, in online, we have increased by over 70% in the last 5 years. Much of this work is taken on by Office of Academic Innovation, and it has done sort of offered a wide set of services to faculty from offering workshops. About 180 workshops have been offered where faculty members can come and engage with the Office of Academic Innovation staff. The design team in Office of Academic Innovation has designed over 170 courses, moved them to online format. Many of our courses were already existing in an online format. They've spent over 1,000+ hours in direct consultation with faculty, built a knowledge base of about 150 articles that faculty can use. So as you probably have on your own campus, some of this work is done by faculty on their own, and some is done through the structured interactions with Office of Academic Innovation. So we wanted to engage faculty through self-used tools. Knowledge base is one of them. More than 2,000 interactions, 2,300 with faculty in workshop and events. So a large number of faculty members are engaged in the services this Office of Academic Innovation has offered, and that has allowed us to work at a level and at a scale with a pretty high pace. I'm happy to go into details during the discussion in that work, but that's what I had to share with you initially. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Subhant. With that, and everyone's doing a fantastic job keeping to time, so the first two have set a high bar for the, for the last two. I'm happy to introduce Laura Pedrick from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I think we have to...
Thank you, Sherry. So the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee could be like a sister city to Portland State. We have, we're urban located. We have about 27,000 students. About 22,000 of them are undergrad. And at our campus, our traditional students, by demographic variables, tend to look like or behave like non-traditional students. They work a lot. They have financial pressures. They're doing a lot of life-work balance. So we've had a long history of doing online and blended education. We have 30+ degrees and certificate programs, and also a lot of students who mix modes intentionally to kind of pack more in their stack of classes that they schedule. But I wanted to talk about a particular program, the UW Flexible Option, which is a program done in partnership with UW Extension. They're kind of the administrative hub, and then UWM is probably the lead. We're the lead campus in terms of number of programs and number of students. The Flex Option is a competency-based, mastery-based online set of degrees. At UWM, after doing pretty extensive market research around employment demand, our programs are BSN in nursing designed for registered nurses, so you have to have that licensure for admission. A diagnostic imaging program, which we are about to expand, hopefully with HLC approval, to all allied health 2-year professional degree or license holders, and information science and technology. And we've launched in January 2014. We currently have about 500 students, 61 graduates. Time to degree is slightly faster than regular pace. Some of that is because the nursing students, through their employers, need to take it a bit at a time. But there is also this enormous flexibility as a true direct assessment CBE program. Students can go at the pace that they desire. So this has been, we found similar to Portland State, the flexibility is just incredibly important. And I have a quote from one of our students who said, I didn't have to follow a schedule telling me it was time to take a summer break, a spring break, winter break. I just moved right through it. And we found, we've done a very robust assessment project with our nursing program funded by the Lumina Foundation that found stronger student learning outcomes, stronger learning gains for students in the Flex Option. So we're not, we're not feeling like we're doing authentic assessments, more qualitative project-based type assessments, and it is really meeting students' needs. Students might need to step away with a work commitment or a family commitment. They can step back. It's different from the strictures of a regular semester. It's much more flexible. It's not PLA-based like the Memphis example, but it is, if people who have relevant work experience can Zoom through. We have had students do, several students do the degree in less than a year. In fact, like 6 to 8 months, just knock it out of the park. We've had students, we have a student who's gotten a job as, in the Google training program. We have students who are reaching, they're now enrolled in our Doctor of Nursing Practice program. A couple of those students, faculty have told us that when you focus on competencies or, what are the outcomes of the degree program, it does influence the rest of their teaching. So there have been those institutional gains, and it does, the partnership with Extension has been helpful in that we have a new role of academic success coach that really mentors students and provides pretty much daily advice to students. One of our challenges was working through, I think as originally conceived, it was supposed to be, I think, leaning more toward objective assessments, and there were some course corrections early on when faculty felt we know students know more than what some of these assessments are showing us. We need to really rethink some of the assessments. So we went in a more qualitative direction. Again, the other big barrier is just the inherent complexity of doing a direct assessment program and the HLC and Department of Ed approval. And there's been some shifting winds at the federal level about innovate, no, don't innovate. so that's kind of an ongoing concern, but there is quite a community growing around doing competency-based education, and based on things that our students have said when they've been interviewed, we do know that we are attracting students to higher education who would otherwise not be able to be here. I'm done.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, and our last speaker is Robert Smith from, Robert Smith from IUPUI. Robert, you may have to unmute yourself. Yeah,
sorry.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so IUPUI is also a research and urban university. We have just under 23,000 undergraduates, right around 8,000 graduate students. And I work in the degree completion office. And the degree completion office is really targeting those students initially who were sort of defined by age, being 24 and older, which is about a quarter of our student population across campus. Lately, we've moved more toward a model of looking at non-traditional factors and kind of utilizing those sort of identifications. So like what makes a non-traditional student, maybe not just their age, but also if they have a dependent, if they have been out of school more than an X amount of time. We tend to go with 2 years. And so really the focus of our office, which was funded through a grant by the Eli Lilly Corporation to sort of meet a goal of the Indiana Commission of Higher Education to increase the number of degrees by the year 2020. Initially, we focus on students, on connecting with students who have college credit and are coming back or returning to complete their degree. We have a lot of different factors that we look at and who we're targeting our services to. One of the priority is definitely, like, we do a lot with PLA. We just hired a faculty member to coordinate PLA across campus, prior learning assessment, and he works with different schools and different programs to kind of see what's already being done and what's working in different academic units to create best practices across the campus level. One thing I forgot to mention is that IUPUI operates on a decentralized model. So what that means is we have sort of a university college where students are doing their like core curriculum, and then they apply to the school that houses their major, and the school confers the degrees. So what we found when the office began is that there was a lot of stuff being done with prior learning assessment, flexible degree, options, all across campus. There was just no hub for it. There was no centralized office to kind of identify it as the best practice. And so our model is we do MOUs with academic departments where they kind of highlight what services that our office can supplement or fill any gaps that exist in their unit. And so it's very individualized, the way that we partner and collaborate across campus. For example, our labor studies program here is totally online, and so we identify that as a partner because of the flexibility is attractive to adult students. And really what they really use from us are the career services. So I meet with labor studies students as part of their internship. And that's really how we can supplement what they're already doing. We find that model works for us, and it creates a lot of collaboration and really strong partnerships across the campus, which can be hard when you're operating on a decentralized model. Everyone's kind of working in silos, and people are unaware of what's happening within other units. And so that's how we function and operate.
Okay, great. So I want to thank everyone for making it in that 5 minutes. I know it's a challenge that I put on people, but we're doing great, so I appreciate that. So with that, what I would like to do is I'm going to open up all of the panelists. The only one I can't do is Sue Plotz. You may have to open up yourself. And allow you to ask questions amongst yourself. There we go. If there's anything based on what you're doing, if you want to learn from one of your colleagues about their programs.
Yeah, Robert. Go ahead, Laura.
My question was for you, Richard. It was about the which adaptive learning platform are you using, and how did you get at kind of the higher end of Bloom's taxonomy for those adaptive learning programs that you developed?
The platform is Realize It.
Okay.
And that was the instructional designer that works in the School of Health Studies had an existing relationship with them, and so it was a real easy transition, and has already been working on a couple of classes, so this is sort of the next iteration, scaling it up. I would rather that they had an opportunity to answer your question about Bloom's taxonomy. The faculty have been very impressed with the ability to incorporate that class, and so I feel that it is being fulfilled, but I don't know the content well enough really to be able to answer your question. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
But one thing I was going to mention to you was when you all were ramping up the competency-based program a couple years ago, I was asked by our provost, now president, to form a competency-based group and see how it would go, and it went nowhere. We couldn't get any traction by using the concept of competency, and quite frankly, much like I think how you described, a lot of it was still objective or quantifiably driven. And it just occurred to me that if we took this existing practice, credit by exam, it was sort of the same thing. It could get, we're all talking about learning outcomes.
Right.
So by just modifying or using that same conversation, that same topic, it's taken off. So it's interesting how just the, excuse me, the terminology can change the adaptation.
And I guess the only caveat I would have is that at some point you may stray over this line, like a country border of into an area where suddenly your accrediting body and the Department of Ed become keenly interested, and there is a whole separate approval process for competency-based programs, particularly if they go the direct assessment route, which gives you the maximum level of flexibility. So that's one of those sort of, it's a difficult thing. We get questions from legislators nationally about, like, we'd like to see more of this, but it's hard to expand when you had to be really in it to be in it, like UW Extension was, to persist on this path. So I'm very interested in what Memphis is doing, and I see some potential. I probably would book a follow-up conversation.
Great, we'd welcome that, and then I can get the answer to your challenging question. Robert, is there we have a similar program called the Finish Line, I believe, but it's only, we've reserved that for students who are senior standing or 90 credits or more. And so we work them into a degree completion component. So is there any kind of threshold with respect to the students that you're working with, credit accumulation threshold, or any qualifications?
There are. It depends on different academic programs. So if a student's going to transfer in that amount of credits, they're most likely going to fall into general studies as an academic unit. Most of the other degree granting programs wouldn't accept that amount of credit transfer. And that's one of our strongest partners is the general studies, because they do, their flexibility comes from their willingness to take credits up to that amount. They only require to graduate students, I believe, 18 credits in-house. So a student could potentially come in. I think the most they'll take is 90, though.
Yeah, usually at 90 to 120, they're going to need the 30 hours of residency to finish off the degree program.
Yeah.
And our 90, actually, we just recently changed the policy. Originally, it was only for Native students who had stopped out, came back after, at some stage, they accumulated 90 credit hours. And in many cases, we may end up putting them in a different, more flexible degree program than they originally were in, because now they've accumulated some of the things we've talked about, experiential learning credit, other competencies, and that may not fit or be accepted by their original degree program.
Mm-hmm.
So we're canvassing where their best degree option is by the advisor that's working in the Finish Line.
Yeah.
I have a question for Saquon, and that is, in your study of students, adult students, and their needs for, particularly the work-life balance concern, what kind of implications have there been for the provision of student services to this population?
A great question. I think when we began our work almost 5 years ago, we did a gap analysis around student services. So where we need to be and where we currently are. And the gaps for online students were profound, I would say. And just as we systematically began our work building internal capacity, instructional design capacity, designing Office of Academic Innovation, getting faculty engaged, at the same level on a parallel track, we have worked on taking our student services online. So when students tell us, for example, they want to come to campus for high-value activity, that is, engage with peers in deep learning, meet a faculty member, work on a small project, etc. They don't want to come to campus and stand in a line, do something which they really should be able to do remotely. And what's interesting here is when we begin to look at the number of students who are taking online courses, and others might find that on their own campus, over 80% of last year's, actually 84% of last year's graduating class took one or more online classes. So our students are taking online classes, large number of faculty are teaching online, and they want to engage in high-value, meaningful activity, be it online or face-to-face. So on the service end, we have systematically worked to take our services online. We redesigned the advising system and sort of building capacity to advise students online, do online scheduling for appointments. Many of the processes and petitions students have to use have been taken online. And this work has been quite systematic over the last 4 years. And we'll continue to do that work. There are areas where we have a lot more to do. And I would say internships, to me, is one of those areas where we can create a lot of value for our students, but our focus, there's only so much bandwidth at one time to deal with both change and doing this stuff, has been focused on coming up with a new advising system. But thinking about internships and engaging with our community in internships is an area where we'll do more work. And our focus currently is on health. There's a team of faculty members, advisors. Others engaged in strategic partnership, and local sort of community members, sort of hospital network is working together to invest in internship for students who are on the health track on campus.
Robert, are you guys doing stuff with that? You're the career office. I think that's an area where we could definitely improve as well. We did a similar gap analysis about the same time period, but we haven't really made what I'd call significant inroads into the internship area. And one of the reasons is that students, it's difficult for them to fit it into their lives, but it's so beneficial for them to have that experience.
Yeah.
How are you doing with that?
I mean, as a student services office, a couple things that we do is we lean more heavily on a coaching model than an advising model. And all of us, whether we're career advisors or academic advisors, we all see students via phone, via video conferencing, which doesn't happen a lot across campus in other units. As a personal career advisor, I think I work with employers quite a bit, and they understand the value of hiring an intern that's of a non-traditional age. That's one of their biggest barriers is professionalism and career management. So they added the National Association of Colleges and Employers recently added those two competencies to sort of what drives career development education. And I think it's pretty telling, and I think it's a good indication of where the field is going or moving toward, which is, it's not enough to have a great resume nowadays. Like, you really you need a plan, and you need to be able to think about your career strategically post-baccalaureate degree. I think that's what I'm hearing employers say. And a lot of, I partner heavily with general studies and the career office in liberal arts, because that's where that degree is housed, what academic school. And employers understand the value of hiring an intern who might be in their mid to late 20s. Definitely.
Okay, great. At this point, what I'm going to do is first ask President Rosenberg if he has any comments or questions. I think you have to, yeah.
I just would be curious about the factors that account for the variation across the initiatives.
Well, why don't I begin? I mean, I think in some degree, the institutional capacity is a guide how we approach how to implement many of these ideas. For example, in case of PSU, when we began, we had absolutely an elegant idea from our faculty about building a competency-based program, but we did not feel we had the instructional design capacity or the platforms that are needed to deliver on the potential of a competency-based program. We are currently experimenting with adaptive and probably do it for the next 2 years, but we are about to issue, almost after 5 years of in-depth work on thinking about flexibility and building sort of internal capacity and quality, we're finally at a place where we can issue an RFP for one program to work with us on competency-based work. The point I'm trying to make is the internal capacity, like how well can you do something, I think really distinguishes or differentiates our approach. I mean, in case of Richard, clearly there was capacity in that case, and they managed to build competency-based programs. In case of Laura and the work they have done there really was, quite inspirational as we were thinking about flexibility. I was not so familiar with IUPUI's work, but the other two very much so. So that would be one thing I will point out, Mark.
I would say that we could not have done this without the involvement of UW Extension, and also with a pretty significant, about $10 million infusion of one-time dollars to build the systems. And as challenging as curricular redesign is, the systems that underlie how academic experiences are really structured have a lot to do with the money and the flow of the money and the flexibility or lack thereof of PeopleSoft as a system to deal with non-term assessment. Actually, it's more complex than that. To simultaneously deal with term-based regular traditional education while administering aid in a non-term way. So we actually wound up doing grants for the first years, and then we were able to award financial aid, and that restricted some of our early growth, but we would not, because this it's completely reinventing the higher ed enterprise around competencies. It isn't just a curricular. It's not like going to a conference and seeing a great thing about active learning and we're going to do this because it's within our control. There's so much about this that is about the underlying enterprise systems, whether it's a student information system, a learning management system, your financial aid system. So we were kind of out there in advance of where the vendor marketplace was. So there were a lot of manual workarounds which are only now going away. And it's extremely heartening to see them go away. But it has meant a lot of back-end manualness behind the scenes that everybody is extremely excited to see. And
yeah, I applaud you all for especially putting Laura and I right next to each other because that's some heavy lifting, and we took the easy way out. I mean, we really had to, and I think we don't often think of. We think of innovation as those as the heavy lifting, major changes, and just this little tweak for us has been actually challenging enough. But I feel very optimistic about the end results once we finally get this package fully put together. And in some cases, the people I talked to, it was sort of a no-duh, like, yeah, why wouldn't we think this was the next iteration of credit by exam or the use of experiential learning credit? So I think that's that continuum of innovation is the extremes or not that we can accomplish by, and many innovations are just a slight tweak of what already exists. And I think that was a much more comfortable and lower maintenance opportunity for us. So I think it's a great contrast between the way that the two of us approached some of the similar challenges or needs.
Probably because we're part of a system. That was one of the things that drove this, was that this was a system level initiative and more than one UW campus participated.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add that for us, we're still a very young office in many ways, like under 4 years old. So what we found is really being able to be nimble and flexible and have your fingers in a lot of different sort of practices that are best practices for adult learners. And we also started a partnership with IU Online, which is a new initiative. So we do all the student services for IU Online. And that has been eye-opening in terms of innovation and sort of rethinking how do you deliver impactful student services to students who may not want to come in or may not have the ability to come in, and really looking at educational resource platforms that are interactive and kind of use gamification to build that engagement with them has been very eye-opening to me. Yeah.
I actually have a question for Suquant, which is, I think, when we've done research on blended education, that's been a kind of a focus area for our Learning Technology Center over time. And they, have found that blended learning is pretty high impact in terms of learning gains. But I think if Portland State is not already doing research into what constitutes a high value experience, I would encourage you to do that, because that's valuable to everybody. Like, what exactly is it that students perceive as being high value? What kind of variability is there across campuses and so forth?
That's a great suggestion, and Laura, some of that is happening, and I think some of them will have to happen more systematically, and I'll tell you why. When we began our work about 4 years ago, about 7% of our student credit hours were generated online. In 4.5, 5 years, it's 15%. And then just in terms of the innovation adoption curve, we'll be working with a very different group of faculty members. Our early adopters are on board, early programs are on board. The student interest clearly is in having experiences that are flexible, that are partly online, or take into account things they already know. So as we work with the next group, I think this kind of foundational research that is not self-guided by the faculty. So our early adopters, like for example, School of Social Work, their faculty are deeply engaged in understanding who their students are, doing ongoing research about the efficacy of the program. They have 90-some plus percentage point retention rates. I mean, so as we shift into working with new group of faculty, that's where we find ourselves. And this summer we are building a set of dashboards that would make visible parts of student experience, and there will be other things that we'll sort of continue to do. But this is an area absolutely that we'll be focusing on.
Okay, guys, I'm going to open it up to the audience to see if they have questions or have programs of their own to share. So those of us who've joined us, if you want to join the conversation, share programs at your own institution, or ask a question, if you notice there's a little hand to the left of your name, just click that and we will open up the microphone and you can speak. So if you have any questions. If you don't want to do it that way, you can also put a question in the chat box as well, which is below. And just send it on and I'll open that too. I don't see any hands raised. Any questions?
Sherry, maybe I missed it. This is Mark Rosenberg, but how about each of the panelists giving us a sense of, is there a vision at your respective institutions about what the market share will be across time of your, if you will, alternative approaches that you've described? How broad and how deep do you see them penetrating?
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'll take a stab at that. If we're talking about sort of the list or bucket of non-traditional means of fulfilling credit, whether that's online, credit for prior learning, I feel that in the very near future we'll be tipping the scales of more than half. Right now, we're right at the national average. 30% of our students each term are completing at least one course online. A good percentage of our undergraduate students are fully online. And then as we have gone to great measures to increase the availability of credit for prior learning, either through credit by exam or experiential learning credit, that's skyrocketed within the last 3 or 4 years. And a good portion of that effort has been driven by our desire, I think, to be very cost conscious, and I add into that mix things like dual enrollment and so forth. I guess that kind of gets a little bit more into the traditional student. and I know our topic was primarily on adult students. We will see the same type of growth in the adult student, and a great deal of that is due to our state's nudge, if you will, within our funding formula. We have a premium that's placed on the graduation of adult students, and we've heeded that call to redirect some emphasis towards that area. So we have, per some of the stats that were shared a bit earlier, the same thing is true in the state of Tennessee, and so we're trying to take a lead in addressing that population.
So we are similar in terms of our penetration. I think we're adopting a new budget model for our institutions that for the first time will incentivize not only the generation of student credit hour, but also majors and graduates, which is in response to external stakeholder, i.e. legislator, Board of Regents, desires and performance metrics. So it is about, the institutional incentives are aligning more with getting students through the degree. Now, there was recently an interesting report by NCES about the size of the degree completing population, and there may be, it's not like it's a limitless population, but I believe that the flexibilities that we're building in for adult students will affect pretty much our entire academic enterprise as students do more job shadowing, more step in, step out, sewing together different, we have a lot of swirling at the traditional age population. So I would say that these are pretty transformative, even if the size of the adult student, which is about 700,000 in Wisconsin, even if that serves as a bit of a limiting factor for the adult students, I think these initiatives will affect the mainstream traditional student as well.
So if I may, I think if you look at the data nationally, the group 18 to 24 is and go from, I think, to go out till 2025. From 2015 to 2025, that population is supposed to decline by about 8.9%. Mm-hmm. And the enrollment as such is going to grow in higher education institution. And the growth largely comes from the next age group that is there. Students who are between 24, I believe, I forget exactly, I think it's up to 40 or something, or 45. And just keeping that dynamics in mind, as well as just the very nature of urban serving universities where we serve non-traditional students and students who are finding their way to PSU after having their work, otherwise, this is an area that would grow. But we do not have specific targets for the number of students we would be serving through the flexible degree program or in the online setting. I shared earlier that over 80% of our students, 84 actually to be precise, in the last year's graduating class did one or more online courses. The growth rate in the population has been over 20% online year after year after year, the last 4 years. Compare that to face-to-face, which is largely flat. So you see a dynamics in play that is somewhat unexpected, at least for me personally when I began this work a few years ago. Quite surprising, and that means that we have to plan quite methodically for the next group. Thank you.
I guess I would say that institutionally, Indiana University is pretty committed to pursuing flexible degrees, especially online. And the way that they've created the organization within our system, the office or the School of Online Education, it sort of functions as a virtual regional campus, right? Like it's not housed anywhere, and it has staff members all across the state, which really allows us to form sort of a hybrid network of student services and allows us to target and different regions for recruitment, which IUPUI couldn't do alone. So to me, that's an indication that the university as a whole is pretty committed for many of the reasons I think other people have mentioned before me. But in terms of like a pen, I don't necessarily have access to that information in my current role.
Okay, with that, I think we're heading to the end of our time. So I'd like to thank all of our speakers for joining us today. Thank you to the participants also for listening in. I hope you learned as much as I did. And I love the fact that they are a different set of programs sitting here, yet all of them speaking to the same overall goal. Thank you, President Rosenberg, for joining us today. Any last words from anyone? If not, we'll say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, and I'm happy to answer any questions offline if anybody has them.
Ditto.
Yeah, I've got one that's going to be going out to everybody. I didn't get a chance to ask.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you.
And also, we have taped this and we'll make it available as like a podcast on the websites as well. So look for that too.
Great.
Thank you so much, everyone.